I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. If you get there before I do, coming for to carry me home. Tell all my friends that I'm coming too, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I love those old spirituals. They have such power, such tremendous conviction that God will bring a better world in the next life. It's interesting because Christianity has sometimes been criticized for this very message, for offering a kind of cheap reward in the next life, a pie in the sky by and by, which in effect can dull the ability of oppressed people to stand up and fight for a better world in this life. But that criticism misses something very important about the Christian message, and certainly about the African American spiritual tradition. And that is that it's layered meanings. As you may be aware, spirituals and work songs were often used as a kind of code language among slaves. On the one hand, they did anticipate heavenly release in death, but they simultaneously spoke of deliverance in this life. The chariot coming for to carry me home was also the Underground Railroad, the rescue that would lead out of slavery and into freedom. Understanding this gives these songs a new sense of richness. If you get there before I do, tell all my friends I'm coming too, coming for to carry me home. So heavenly deliverance and worldly deliverance are deeply enmeshed in these songs. The ultimate future of life in God and the temporal future of life north of the Mason-Dixon line, both of these brought hope, perseverance, and a spirit of resistance to a people trying to deal with the brutal persecutions of slavery. I got to thinking about spirituals as I read our passage from Revelation today, because Revelation has many of these same qualities. In a sense, it's the spiritual of the New Testament. It too comes out of a community that was severely persecuted, probably under the Roman Emperor Domitian in the late 1st century. We need to understand that in the Roman Empire at that time, there was no division between religion and politics. The emperor was considered a god and part of the pantheon of Roman gods. And anyone who refused to worship him was committing an act of political treason. So these Christian communities that began popping up around the empire, explicitly serving a god they claimed was higher than the emperor, posed a threat to the political system and provided a very handy scapegoat as well. The state brought tremendous power to bear against them, even subjecting them to execution in a number of horrific ways. To strengthen themselves against this persecution, the Johannine community, a Christian community that produced a number of texts in our New Testament, one of which was Revelation, which, like our African American spirituals, holds out this beautiful promise of victory and triumph in the final judgment. In our passage today, for example, those believers who have come out of the great ordeal are caught up in a glorious world of peace and joy. Just imagine how the words of Revelation must have sounded to people who had watched loved ones being fed to wild animals for sport, and who had to skulk around, always in fear of being caught by authorities or turned in by neighbors. The one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to the springs of the water of life, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Those are words that might help to carry a person through the darkest crisis. But you know, Revelation has something else in common with African American spirituals. Not only does it promise a final victory after death, but it too is written in a kind of symbolic code that refers also to worldly matters of its time. Biblical scholars tell us that Babylon is a code word for the Roman Empire, which a couple of decades before Revelation was written, destroyed the Jewish temple, just as the actual Babylon had done about 665 years prior. Likewise, the beast in Revelation represents the Roman emperor. So this book's admonition not to worship the beast, but to remain firm in commitment to Christ operated on several levels, like our spirituals. It not only held out hope for reward after death, but it also carried a politically subversive message of resistance in this life. A little earlier, I mentioned the criticism that Christianity might cause oppressed people, such as Black American slaves, to withdraw from real world struggles and wait passively for deliverance in death. There may be some truth to this, although we don't find much evidence of it in the examples we've been looking at today. Ironically, it may be Christians who are not persecuted who are in most danger of this kind of withdrawing faith. North American white Christians with homes and incomes, which is most of us, certainly have our struggles. Some of them are very profound struggles, but we are not an oppressed group. Few of us are in any danger of being martyred for our beliefs. And yet, white North American Christianity particularly emphasizes the notion that living as a good Christian mainly consists of developing a private, individual relationship with God and coming to church on Sundays, plus perhaps a little charity. Maybe we, who are on top of the global pecking order, don't mind waiting for pie in the sky by and by, because we're already having our cake in this world and eating it too. So if there's a prophetic word that Revelation has to offer us today, it's that claiming Christ calls us into the world to heal and love and make just. Revelation's kingdom of heaven, where people will hunger no more and thirst no more, and where God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, is a world whose seeds we need to be about the business of planting. The composers and singers of Black American spirituals understood that. And the community that produced the book of Revelation in the late first century understood it too. Their messages spoke to worldly issues and counseled worldly actions, even as they also promised heavenly grace. Of course, there are white Christians who have understood this call to faithful action in the world. One who springs immediately to my mind is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great German theologian and martyr. Bonhoeffer was a pacifist who resisted the rise of Nazism during the 30s and 40s, breaking with the German church as it supported Hitler and going on and running an underground seminary. Then at some point, Bonhoeffer realized that he had to do something more. Despite his deeply held commitment to nonviolence, Bonhoeffer felt morally and spiritually compelled to act against the tide of evil sweeping across his country. So he got involved in a number of plots to assassinate Hitler. Every single one of those plots failed. As the last one failed, Bonhoeffer was already being held in prison for his involvement in a previous one. When the radio reported that Hitler had survived this final attempt, it was pretty clear that Bonhoeffer was going to be executed. But the day after that defeat, Bonhoeffer wrote an incredible letter to a friend. In it, he says, and I quote, "It is only by living completely in this world that one learns to have faith. By this worldliness, I mean living unreservedly in life's duties, problems, successes, and failures. In so doing, we throw ourselves completely into the arms of God, taking seriously not our own sufferings, but those of God in the world. That, I think, is faith." May we all grow more deeply into just such a this worldly faith. Amen.